Friends, sit back and let me tell you about one of the wildest, most surreal encounters I've ever had with an entitled neighbor who thought the world belonged to her. If you've ever lived in a neighborhood with an HOA or had a run-in with someone who thinks they can control everyone, you'll understand the frustration. But this story takes it to a whole new level. It all started with a car. Yes, just a car. My own legally purchased, legally parked car, yay bid, yay parked car. Yet somehow, it became the spark that lit a firestorm of drama. Police lights. And ultimately a public humiliation for one very entitled HOA Karen. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was who she was dealing with. I wasn't just a homeowner. I wasn't just another neighbor. I'm a federal interior chief. And when the law is on your side, no amount of screaming threats or false calls to the cops can change the truth. So grab your coffee and settle in. Because this story will have you shaking your head, maybe even laughing out loud, and definitely cheering by the end. It was a warm Saturday morning in late spring. I had just washed my Jeep Grand Cherokee, a car I'd worked hard for and kept in mint condition. The metallic blue paint glistened under the sun. I couldn't help but feel proud as I stood back, admiring the shine. My wife Laura came out holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Looks like it just rolled off the lot," she said, handing me a cup. Yeah, I grinned. Might be the cleanest car on the block. Our neighborhood was quiet. It's a kind of suburban development where everyone had similar houses and neat lawns. On paper, it looked like the American dream. But in reality, our HOA was run by a group of self-important busybodies, none more infamous than Karen. Now. Karen wasn't her real name, but it's what everyone in the neighborhood called her behind her back. She was the self-appointed enforcer of all things proper, whether or not she had the authority. If she didn't like the color of your flowers, she'd report you. If your trash can stayed out 5 minutes too long, she'd take pictures and send emails to the board. And apparently, today, my car was her new obsession. I was just drying the Jeep when I heard the sharp, unmistakable sound of high heels clacking against the pavement. Sure enough, there came Karen, striding down the sidewalk like she owned the whole subdivision. She stopped at the edge of my driveway, placed her hands on her hips, and squinted at my car. "That's new," she said flatly. "Had it for about a year," I replied, politely, hoping that would be the end of it. But of course it wasn't, you know. "That model isn't approved for this neighborhood." I blinked. "Excuse me. It doesn't fit the aesthetic. The HOA guidelines are very clear about vehicles. We can't have just any type of car cluttering the driveways. It lowers property values." I chuckled, thinking she was joking. But her face stayed stone-cold serious. "Karen," I said calmly, "this is my driveway. This is my car. And it's well within the law." Her eyes narrowed. "If you know what's good for you, you'll park it somewhere else. Or better yet, you can hand it over to me. I'll make sure it's not a problem anymore." I nearly dropped my coffee. "Hand it over. You're asking me to give you my car?" She crossed her arms. "That's right. I'll take care of it. Otherwise, I'll be forced to escalate this." I laughed and walked back toward the house. "Karen, that's not how this works. Have a nice day." But apparently, my refusal was the ultimate insult. Because not 20 minutes later, I heard sirens. Red and blue lights flashed down the street, and a police cruiser pulled up right in front of my driveway. Laura looked out from the porch. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. 2 officers stepped out. One of them looked apologetic, the other more businesslike. Karen was right behind them, pointing dramatically at my Jeep. "That's the car. That's the one he stole. He's refusing to give it back to me." I felt my blood pressure spike. "Stole," I exclaimed. Karen jabbed her finger toward me. "He's keeping my vehicle hostage. I demand you arrest him immediately." The older officer held up his hand. "Ma'am, let's slow down. Sir, is this your car?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I have the title, the registration, and the keys right here." I opened my wallet and handed over my federal ID, along with the car registration. The officer took one look at the ID, and his entire demeanor shifted. He cleared his throat and gave me a subtle nod of respect. "Sir, I see who you are. We'll handle this." Karen, still fuming, barked, "Well, what are you waiting for? Arrest him." The officer turned to her. "Ma'am, this man is the registered owner of this vehicle. It is not your car. In fact, making false police reports is a crime." Karen's face went red. No. You don't understand. The HOA rules give me authority." Laura couldn't hold back anymore. She laughed from the porch. "Karen, the HOA doesn't outrank the federal government." At that point, even the younger officer smirked. But instead of backing down, Karen grew louder. "I don't care who he thinks he is. This neighborhood has standards, and that car doesn't belong here. If you won't arrest him, then I'll have the HOA tow it myself." The older officer crossed his arms. "Ma'am, if you touch this vehicle, you will be trespassing and committing theft. Do you understand me?" Karen stomped her foot like a child. "This isn't fair. He can't just ignore me." I took a deep breath and finally spoke up, my voice calm but firm. "Karen, listen carefully. I am a federal interior chief. That means I oversee matters far larger than a suburban driveway squabble. You are harassing me, lying to law enforcement, and trying to claim property that doesn't belong to you. If you continue, I will not only file charges, but I will ensure the HOA board is fully investigated for enabling this nonsense." For the first time, Karen's confidence cracked. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The officer looked at me. "Sir, would you like to press charges today?" I glanced at Laura, who shook her head slightly. We both knew dragging this out right now would just escalate things even more. "Not today," I said. "But consider this a warning." The officers made. Karen stepped back and warned her not to call 91111, petty grievances again. They drove off, leaving Karen standing there on the sidewalk, fuming but powerless. Laura came down and put her arm around me. "You handled that better than I would have," she said softly, smiled. "Something tells me this isn't the last we've heard from her." And I was right. Because that wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. For a few weeks, things were quiet. Karen avoided us, though we'd see her peeking through her blinds whenever I pulled into the driveway. But if you know anything about people like her, you know they don't just let things go. One morning, I found a letter taped to my front door. It was stamped with the HOA logo and written in bold, accusatory language. "This notice serves as a final demand. The vehicle parked at your residence is in violation of HOA guidelines. Remove it immediately, or the board will take corrective action, including fines and towing." Laura read it over my shoulder. "They're doubling down?" "Looks like it," I muttered. But what Karen and her friends on the HOA didn't realize was that I had kept every piece of documentation, every interaction, and every report from the police officers. And as a federal official, I knew exactly how to handle this. I started documenting everything. Photos of the car in my driveway, copies of the registration, even video clips of Karen pacing back and forth in front of our property muttering, "Out her car." I also pulled up the HOA's bylaws. Nowhere, absolutely nowhere, did it say anything about the kind of vehicle you could own. There were vague statements about maintaining a neat appearance and avoiding inoperable vehicles, but my Jeep didn't fit into either of those categories. Laura smirked as I stacked the paperwork into a neat folder. "You're building a case, aren't you?" "Better," I said. "I'm about to end this once and for all." The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday evening. I showed up, folder in hand, Laura by my side. The room was filled with neighbors, most of whom looked weary from years of Karen's antics. Karen sat at the head of the table like a queen on her throne. When she saw me, her lips curled into a smirk. Well, if it isn't our neighborhood troublemaker." I ignored the jab and set my folder down. "Let's get straight to business." The board began reading the complaint about my car, parroting Karen's language about violations. I let them finish, then calmly laid out my evidence: registration, title, photos, the police report noting Karen's false call, and finally, my federal ID. The room went silent. I stood up and addressed the board. "Ladies and gentlemen, let me be perfectly clear. You have no authority to seize, tow, or demand removal of my vehicle. Any further attempts will be treated as harassment and unlawful interference with my property rights. Furthermore, the false police report filed by Mrs. Karen here could result in criminal charges. Karen's face went pale. She sputtered, You can't threaten me like that." "It's not a threat," I said evenly. "It's a fact. I've been patient, but this ends tonight." The room erupted in whispers. One of the board members, an older gentleman, cleared his throat. "I think it's best we drop this matter immediately." Another nodded. "Agreed. This has gone too far." For once, Karen wasn't in control. She sat there trembling with rage as the board voted unanimously to dismiss the complaint against me. In fact, they announced they'd be reviewing her position on the board entirely. When the meeting adjourned, neighbors came up to shake my hand. One woman whispered, "Thank you. We've all been too afraid to stand up to her." Laura squeezed my hand and smiled. Looks like justice finally caught up with her. As we walked to our car, Karen rushed after us. "You think you've won? You think this is over?" I turned, meeting her glare. "No, Karen, it's over because you made it this way. You could have minded your own business. You could have been a good neighbor. But instead, you lied, you harassed, and you tried to steal. And now, you've lost everything." She froze, speechless. For once, she had no comeback. Over the next few months, Karen faded from the spotlight. She lost her seat on the HOA board, and eventually, she put her house up for sale. The neighborhood became a much quieter, friendlier place without her constant meddling. As for me, I still drive that Jeep every single day. Every time I pull into my driveway, I smile, remembering the day Karen tried to take it from me and how the truth, the law, and a little patience turned the tables completely. Folks, this story isn't just about a car. It's about standing up to bullies, no matter what form they take. Whether it's a pushy neighbor, an overreaching HOA, or anyone who thinks they can take what's yours, you have the right to protect what you've earned. And sometimes, the best way to win isn't by shouting or fighting, but by calmly showing the truth, because in the end, truth always wins.